your concern seems to be very similar. They will not disarm. Do you think there's any conditions they will disarm?
Well, I actually do believe. I mean, the fact that Hamas has put it on the table in the past, but the conditions are Israel won't ever agree to these conditions. Right now, let's just be honest. Hamas has fought the Israeli army to a standstill. That's why there's negotiations. If Hamas was beatable, defeatable, we wouldn't be here. And so now ask yourself, what happens to the Palestinians if Hamas disarms? Who will protect the Palestinians against an Israeli threat? The Israelis have said there are no red lines. There are no red lines, meaning they will hunt down, kill, do whatever they want to do, where, anytime, anywhere, as they see fit. They're literally a lawless organization, self-admitted. So now you're in Hamas's shoes, and a condition for peace is to totally disarm. Who will guarantee the security of the Palestinian people, if not Hamas? And it can't be Israel, and it can't be the United States. It can't be any party to the conflict. If there was a mechanism in place that could provide real security guarantees, like if Israel bombs Hamas, Israel gets blown off the face of the earth kind of guarantees, real deterrence, then I could see Hamas saying, we will disarm. They say a two-state solution, but one of the things about a two-state solution is that the Palestinian state would have a legitimate right of self-defense, and that's something that the Israelis have always said, you can have a Palestinian state, but you can't have a Palestinian army. This is just totally unrealistic. And until Israel changes its stance, I don't see any progress being made there. But I am optimistic. Again, what Hamas has done here is very clever. To agree to this Palestinian structure of technocrats, but to say we need to play a role, because what this does is it legitimizes Hamas politically. And in the long term, Hamas will become a dominant political power under this structure. And people should not be afraid of this, because actually when resistance groups take over political responsibilities, they actually moderate. Look at Hezbollah. Hezbollah in Lebanon, they are part of the government. And as a result of the part of the government, they are responsive to the needs, wants, and desires of the Lebanese population. If Hamas is allowed to, grow as a political movement and end its term as a resistance movement, I think it can be a responsible part of, the future of Gaza, of Palestine. And it must be, because they have established credentials that nobody else in the Palestinian community has to stand up for Palestine. Say, let's be frank, there wouldn't be discussion of a Palestinian state today if it weren't for Hamas. I mean, people can scream all they want about October 7th, but from the Hamas perspective, if there wasn't an October 7th, we wouldn't be talking about a Palestinian state today.
The kind of argument to that is that Hamas killed any chance for a two-state solution. Now they've given a voice to the hardliners that do not want a Palestinian state, and now they've got a justification for their stance. October 7th, it will happen again. We need to guarantee our security. That's my concern in what Hamas did. Their intention was to bring more awareness to the Palestinian cause and to fight for a two-state. They want a one-state solution, but at least bring attention to a two-state solution. But they've done the complete opposite. Your point of, a lot of people like to criticize, like, how can Hamas be part of a government, of a governing body after what they did on October 7th? A kind of argument to that, and get your thoughts on it, is that al-Jalani, al-Shara, president of Syria, was part of ISIS, and now he's governing Syria. He's meeting leaders in Europe, in the US, which kind of shows that there is a possibility for even a designated terrorist organization to change and become part of a governing body.
Menachem Begin was a terrorist. Menachem Begin was a terrorist. And yet he became the prime minister of Israel. So let's knock it off with this terrorism. One man's terrorism, terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. We need to be clear on that.
Scott, what do you think of Trump's response? What makes me more optimistic is that Trump, when I first saw Hamas's response, I thought Trump would be pissed off. He wouldn't take credit for it, because they did not really, their stance hasn't changed much. They're just they've changed their tonality. Maybe their intentions, but it's, a 5 to 10% incremental improvement. Yet Trump is calling it a success, and he said Hamas is ready for a peace plan, for a long-term peace plan, and he asked Israel to stop the bombing Gaza, to stop the attacks. And Israel has abided by Trump's request. Is, some arguing that Trump is focusing more on optics rather than realism because there hasn't really nothing has really changed. Or another way of looking at it is that Trump, despite Hamas' stance not having changed much, he is pressuring Israel to try to end the war because he wants to become to be seen as the peace president. Which one do you think is more likely to be accurate?
Trying to read Donald Trump's like trying to read tea leaves in a Dubai chai house. It's whatever you want to see. I am opting this time that he's serious about peace, that this isn't just about optics, because where do optics take you? We see right now the eternal frustration that Trump has about Ukraine and Russia because he chose optics over substance and ignored reality, and he's left hanging. Here, there is reality, and the reality is Hamas isn't going away. Trump can't make it go away. Hamas doesn't respond to threats. I mean, what is Trump going to do? Blow up the buildings that have already been destroyed by Israel? When he says all hell will break loose, all hell has broken loose. There's not an additional hell that Trump can impose. He needs peace in the Middle East. He needs this conflict to come to an end. The question I have isn't the desire of Donald Trump or the intent of Donald Trump. I do think it's clear here in this case that he desires peace. His intent is to bring an end to the fighting. And he is a businessman, a transactional leader. Again, you brought up a very important point. American officials are shaking hands with Jolani, a man responsible for the deaths of Americans when he was with Al-Qaeda and ISIS, a man who fought the Americans in Iraq, a man who was responsible for ISIS deaths of Americans in Syria. And today we're shaking hands. We recognize this government. And this is Donald Trump that's doing this. So the idea that you can reform a terrorist organization, reform a terrorist leadership, isn't to be dismissed outright, because we have a clear precedent of the reformation of terrorists. Yeah. Can Donald Trump get Israel to buy into this? That's the big question. This is the road. The roadblock isn't Hamas. I believe Hamas is ready to make a deal, which is why Donald Trump, a deal maker, is sort of pleased, because now a deal is in the process. Negotiations are underway. And Donald Trump has always said, I like the strong guys. There ain't nobody stronger on the table today than Hamas. All right. They are as strong as anybody. They are as resilient as anybody. And I think Donald Trump knows this. Can he get Israel? Can he get Netanyahu to come along? And this is the $1 million question, because to do that would require the United States to be willing to put pressure on Israel that to date, no American president has been able to do. And Donald Trump, who has surrounded himself with cabinet members and such who are extremely supportive of Israel, are loath to support that kind of pressure. So that's the weak link.
Exactly. That concerns me as well. Yeah, I'm really curious how he could do this, because I want to go through again. Me and you agree that this is very similar to Hamas's stance in prior negotiations. So the three big points here is, number one, hostage release. Hamas has said multiple times before, we will release the hostages if Israel and obviously releases Palestinian hostages or prisoners, as they agreed to in this new deal, Trump's deal, a full Israeli withdrawal from Gaza and an end to the blockade. Now, this is a sticking point now, because in Trump's peace plan, it wasn't a full withdrawal from Israel, from what I understand. It was a partial withdrawal with a buffer zone there. So in this deal, it's relatively the same thing, except there's a buffer zone in there. Number two is a governance handover. They've hinted before that they would hand over governance to an independent body, interim national government with Fatah and other factions. But they wanted to play a part in that governance. Same thing now. They've said the same thing. They didn't explicitly say they are happy to have an independent body they are not part of. So that hasn't changed much, maybe incrementally. And number three is the disarmament. They've disagreed. They've rejected it previously, as we've said before, hinted that they could accept it if there's a two-state solution. And in this case today as well, they haven't really accepted it. So if you look at those things, not much has changed. Yet Trump is trying to get credit and trying to hint that Hamas is ready for peace. That's a really positive development. Now, you've mentioned a really important sticking point. How can he convince Netanyahu to stop this war? Netanyahu has agreed to a ceasefire now, and they're apparently preparing for prisoner swap or hostage swap. What do you think will happen next, and how do you think Trump will be able to pressure or convince Netanyahu to end the war? Because it is a very important point, Scott. I want to reiterate the point you made, is that Trump does not want the same embarrassment or I'd use the word